right. Well, welcome everyone to our Future Proof Your Retirement free monthly webinar, where we're going to be going over some critical details on midlife planning for late life success. While you will meet all of us during the presentation, I just wanted to make a quick introduction to the Future Proof team. So we consist of Alisha Mack, a senior living advisor with Oasis Senior Advisors, Joy McMurchy, a certified financial educator, and my name is Jacquie Walter. I'm a health and Medicare insurance broker with Transiting Insurance. And today our guest speaker is Holly Bollman, the Community Engagement Coordinator at Lumina Hospice and Palliative Care. Our purpose when we created this resource group was to focus on educating people so that they're prepared for a successful and crisis-proof retirement and late life. While you just met the founders, every month we do have guest speakers adding value to our free webinar, including speakers on estate planning, forever home planning, supplemental insurances, and tax planning. Our vision is to bring up those questions that you wouldn't think to ask so that we can help you prepare before it's too late. It's always better to have a plan before you are in crisis mode. And as a reminder, please jot down any questions that you have for the end, as we will have time for a Q&A session. And our first presenter today is the wise Joy McMurchy.
Well, thank you so much, Jacquie. Today, I'm talking about quite different things than usual, but really talking about how you can help your family help you in a crisis when you aren't able to speak for yourself or when someone else is needing to act on your behalf. So we're going to talk about some different documents that you might need for that. But first, this is just an overview of everything that my team and I work with for our clients, starting with financial education, having the proper protection in place, making sure you have a robust emergency fund, debt management, cash flow, building wealth, and then protecting wealth is ultimately what I'm going to be talking about, and the types of documents that you'll need for either making sure that you're taken care of at the end of your life, or if a crisis happens, or passing on that wealth to the next generation. So, fun fact for you, I used to say that 54% of US adults do not have a will, but we got a new study out just last month. It is 67% of US adults do not have a will right now. And this is really concerning because this is the primary way that people tell their family and the probate court what they want to happen with their things after they pass away. And if no one knows what you want, how is anyone supposed to be able to navigate them? It can be very messy, and it can really damage a lot of family relationships too. So let's talk a little bit more about all the documents that you are going to need when it comes to anything with either financial or your health. First off, the thing that most people think of is a will, and it's a legal document that first and foremost identifies who is going to be able to make decisions for either your children or your property after you pass away. And this is something that is vital, especially if you have young children, because this is the only way to say who's going to be the guardian of your minor children. Otherwise, the state gets to decide. And we all have so much confidence in the state these days. Secondly, you have your financial power of attorney. This is a document that's actually going to be used while you're still alive. If you have a stroke, if you're in a car crash and in the hospital, and you can't manage your affairs like paying bills, taking care of insurance, paying taxes, if you need to sell your house and buy a different house that's a better fit for your needs, and you're not able to go out and do that, you have to name someone else to do that. And these can also be useful in non-crisis situations as well. My parents were missionaries in Costa Rica for 10 years, and they set up a power of attorney so that I could take care of anything that they needed here in the US, and they didn't have to fly up here every time they needed to sign a document. For your health decisions, in Oregon, we have an advanced healthcare directive, and this identifies the person who is going to make healthcare decisions for you if you cannot. Yet again, another document that's useful while you're still alive if you are not able to advocate for yourself. And Holly will go into that in more detail later on. And then also in conjunction with that, you often need this HIPAA release form that permits your healthcare agent to access your medical records and also to talk with your medical team. And last but not least, don't forget your pets. You can have a pet trust that leaves instructions and money for the person who you want to care for your pets after you are gone. And this is a really big concern for a lot of people because our pets are part of our family. You want to make sure that they're taken care of as well. So when it comes to wills, a lot of people think if I say I want my children to get everything in my will, or maybe there's one child who isn't in your life anymore, and so you don't want them to get anything, you say, all right, I just need to name them in my will and we're good to go. That is not the case when it comes to financial accounts. Financial accounts or life insurance policies, any type of account that will have a beneficiary on it does not go along with what your will says if your will is different than the account. Your beneficiary basically trumps your will if it says anything different. And there's some like serious court cases that have happened with this. For instance, William Hillman, who died in 2008, he had a life insurance policy worth over $100,000, and his ex-wife and widow were fighting over this. It actually made it to the Supreme Court because the ex-wife was named as the beneficiary on his life insurance policy, and the will said that his current wife, his widow, was supposed to get it. But the Supreme Court ruled that the ex-wife would get everything with this life insurance policy. There was no splitting it. She got the whole thing. And so this is like a really serious thing that people can, it can cause a lot of problems for people if you're not updating these as you go along. Now, 401ks are the exact opposite. It goes to your current spouse unless they agree otherwise. But if you have children with a previous marriage, they could be disinherited if you do not have it set up that they are supposed to get that money, or your ex-spouse is supposed to be included in that. Property inheritance obviously depends on title, but usually do not recommend changing property to your children on the title. There's some serious tax consequences with that. It's many times it's better to just let them inherit the property rather than transferring it over to them. And then obviously your family heirlooms, and especially if you're in a blended family and there are family heirlooms that need to go back to specific sides of the family, those are really important to name in your will or your trust to make sure that they are going to the correct people. When we were looking at the documents earlier, we mentioned a will, but a trust is another option when it comes to how you want your estate to be settled after you pass away. The difference between the two is that a will is a document that needs to go through a court process to transfer ownership of those pieces of property to the next people. A trust is something that does not involve court involvement because you transfer your property into the trust. So say your house would go into the trust, and when you pass away, the house is actually not transferring ownership because the trust still owns it after you pass away. There are just new trustees that come into force when you pass away. So if you name your children as your secondary trustees, then when you pass away, your trust passes on to them. They can now take care of everything and divide it up according to your instructions on there. Wills are very low cost or free to make initially, but down the road, they can have really costly probate fees. A lot of people think, well, the will is a better option because it doesn't cost me as much, but I've heard of one recently where the estate had over $20,000 in probate fees to get this estate through that process. And it was really a struggle for the family because they didn't have that money just available to be able to pay this stuff. So it was a lot of it went on the credit card. Actually, it was sort of scary. But when it comes to a trust, It's a little more expensive upfront. $600 is the least expensive one that I've seen. I've seen ones that go up to maybe $2,000 or a little bit more, depending on how complicated it is. But after that, there are no additional fees. You can even make changes to a trust and not have to go and have the whole thing redone every single time. Wills also can be contested. Say you left a child out of your will, but you didn't specifically say, I don't want this child to get anything. The court can add that person back in if they petition the court and the court decides in their favor. Trusts are much more set in stone. Your instructions have to be carried out. And the other part of this is the timing of it all. Probate in Oregon has been backed up for a long time, and it can take up to 2 years to get an estate through the probate process. It's extremely hard on the family to have things dragged out that long. A trust, on the other hand, is family controlled from the moment that the person passes away. And so it's very easy for the family to take care of. But, it's one of those things where I'm not going to give a general rule on this because each family's situation is different. And so it's always good to talk to someone and get some advice before you commit to either one of these. All right. That was all I have for you today. And really, when it comes to making sure that your wishes are clearly laid out, one of the advantages to working with me and my team is that we've got a large team of experts who can help you with anything that you might need help understanding or setting up so that things are carried out the way you want them to be. And the other thing about it is that we never charge for advice. It's always free to talk to us. And we really want to make some top level financial strategies available to the average person. So I look forward to hearing from you. And now I get to introduce Holly Bollman, who's going to explain more about some very confusing documents.
Thank you, Joy. Hi, everyone. I'm Holly Bollman. I do community engagement and donor relations for Lumina. We're an independent nonprofit hospice serving Lynn and Benton counties. And so today I'm going to be sharing with you some updates to the Oregon POLST form and share a little bit about the advanced directive. So why is it important to look at such documents now? 90% of people think it's important to talk about end-of-life wishes with their loved ones, but only 27% have done so. And why don't we talk about it? So 1 in 5 respondents have said that they have avoided the subject out of worry about upsetting their loved ones. And so the question I have for you is, would you rather have an uncomfortable conversation now or deal with the stress of guessing what your loved one might have wanted after they die? Okay, so these are the main differences between the advanced directive and POLST. The advanced directive is not a medical order form, but it is used when you no longer have the capacity to make medical decisions for yourself. You can think of the advanced directive as more of a planning document, so it's proactive. And then the POLST form is portable orders for life-sustaining treatment. And it's just that, really. It identifies if you want to be resuscitated, and it is a medical order form. You can have both forms, but only people who are very old and very frail need a POLST form. So if you've recently, turned 65 and you're in good health, you probably don't need a POLST form. Physicians can't require that you have a POLST form, but physicians are required to sign your POLST in order for it to be official or active. Okay, this chart lays out the differences that we've already discussed, and we'll continue to go over a little bit more of these. And I believe we'll be sending this out for you afterwards. We'll make this available for you afterwards so you have it to reference when you need it. Okay. And so now let's look at what's new on the POLST form this year. this is what the form looks like. It does have that bright pink color. And you can view a copy of the form online, but you can't download it or file it without the help of your physician. So you do have to do that with the physician, and it gets filed, it gets put on their online electronic records. So there were some changes to the form this year, but the important thing to know is that you don't have to, if you don't have any changes to make on the form, if you already have a POLST, then you don't need to do anything just because there's a new form. If you already have a form on file, it will stay on file and it will be active. So only any changes or new forms being submitted after July 1st of this year will be on the new form. Okay, so this is section A of the form. This is where you choose resuscitation or CPR or not. And there were not any changes to this section, but if the first box there is checked, then in the next section you do have to select something specific. So we will look at that section. So if in section A you had checked that you do not want CPR, then you would choose full treatment in this section. And also what's new in this section really is just the terminology. Selective treatment used to be limited treatment, but they updated the language to just get on board with other states in our region. Washington and California had already had that language, selective treatment. And what this section does is defines what medical interventions you would like when you have a pulse and are breathing. Okay, section C, this is a new requirement for the POLST form. You must now document who participated in the conversation about your care. And this is good. It encourages us to think about and choose a healthcare proxy. So although it's not necessarily who you are identifying in this section, it gives patients the right to talk about their healthcare wishes with others. Okay, so the next slide identifies what if I don't have a healthcare proxy. So then what happens? So according to the Oregon state law, there are priorities set for who can make decisions on your behalf if you're not able to, and if you don't have a proxy identified in your advanced directive. So you can have more than one healthcare proxy, and you probably should. It's actually recommended that you have 3. So this list is in order of who would be asked to make decisions on your behalf, and it's defined by the Oregon Health Authority. So guardian would be first if there is any, which is not likely to be the case. The patient's spouse, which this differs a little bit from what Joy was talking about, where as in this case, the ex-spouse is excluded from that situation. An adult, majority of the adult children, parent, a majority of the adult siblings, any adult relative or adult friend, which in that case could be, there was an example given that someone's landlord was their next closest adult person to them, and so that was the person that was asked if they wanted to make decisions on behalf of someone. So it is really important to identify in your advanced directive who your healthcare proxy is, otherwise it could end up being your landlord. So very important to identify that. Okay. So now let's look at the Oregon Advanced Directive and what that entails. So the first part identifies you and your information. Second part identifies your healthcare proxy or proxies. And then you identify your preference for medical care. And it goes through 3 different scenarios. It goes through a terminal condition, And advanced progressive illness and permanently unconscious are those different scenarios. And here you choose what treatments or life-sustaining treatments you do or do not want in those scenarios. And then you go into what's important to you. So you actually will record, it'll ask you what you value most in life. It'll ask about spiritual beliefs and what matters to you in your medical care. And then you have space for additional information, such as where you want to receive care. Most people will say at home or not in the hospital. You can also add documents to your advance directive, this is important to differentiate. You can't alter the advance directive form in any way, or it may become invalid, but you can add documents to the existing form if you need to. Okay. And these are just some important things to note when we're talking about these documents. So living wills are a type of advance directive, and they refer to specific documents that shape end-of-life treatment. Advance directives should be updated, and we like to use the rule of the 5 Ds. So every decade, if there's been a divorce, a death, decline in health, or a new diagnosis that is potentially terminal. So if any of those things have recently occurred in life, it's probably time to update your advance directive. And when you submit your POLST form, you will actually receive a letter acknowledging that the form was entered into the electronic system. So if you do not receive that, you should check in with your doctor's office or wherever you submitted your form and just make sure that it is active. The Oregon POLST does say that they may remove forms from the registry if they're 10 years or older. That's not always the case, but it's important to just check when you go in for your routine visits with the doctor and just make sure that is still active. Okay, I think that is all I have. All right, so I'm going to pass it on to Jacquie.
Thanks, Holly. That was such valuable information. So we really appreciate you sharing that. There's a lot of just things that we don't know until someone points it out. So, and that's why we have this resource group. So my name is Jacquie Walter. I'm a health and Medicare insurance advisor with Translating Insurance. So I understand insurance can sometimes feel like a foreign language. And I want to help take the confusion out of health insurance solutions, both before and after retirement. We have access to so much valuable information on the internet these days, including insurance plan, pricing, information on, co-pays and co-insurance. But when you DIY your health insurance, you're not only forced to pour through 40+ plan details and spend hours and hours of your time researching, you also have the uncertainty of wondering, did I find the right answers on the internet? Was the advice I got from my neighbor right? And then you start to second guess yourself, and eventually you're going to regret not reaching out to an expert in the field. So a health insurance advisor can save you countless hours and help narrow down your options in around 15 minutes. When people are approaching retirement, the most common questions are, what is Medicare? And should I get a Medicare supplement, or should I get a Medicare Advantage plan? What if I need to change plans? Maybe you move or your health changes. And can I change my plan whenever I want? As a broker, our job is to help you understand and navigate these questions for free so you don't have to figure it out on your own. A lot of people think that when they retire and go on Medicare, everything's going to be free and everything's going to be covered. But unfortunately, this is simply not true. So Medicare is a federally funded health insurance program for people who are 65 or older, or those with a qualified disability, but it is not free. Medicare has monthly premiums, as well as co-pays, deductibles, co-insurance, and there's quite a lot of things that original Medicare doesn't cover, like dental, vision, hearing, and naturopathic care. Medicare also does not cover long-term care. So it's really important to talk to a financial advisor and set up some long-term care insurance solutions before it becomes cost prohibitive. Another surprising fact is that Original Medicare does not have a max out of pocket. That's right. You have unlimited financial exposure on Original Medicare, which is why it's my job to help fill in the gaps that Medicare leaves behind so that we can mitigate your financial risk and help protect your retirement savings. And a lot of people confuse Medicare with Medicaid, but they are two completely different things. They do both help with your health insurance out-of-pocket costs. Medicaid is meant for low-income individuals who can't afford premiums or copays or coinsurance. So it is possible to have Medicare and Medicaid at the same time if you're a low-income senior or a low-income disabled beneficiary. In this case, there are actually some additional benefits that Medicare provides. So it's always good to talk to a broker to make sure that you're getting all the benefits that you're entitled to. When you're making your Medicare decisions at age 65 or older, when you're 65, you tend to think like, I'm healthy, I don't need a lot of care, I'm going to pick the cheapest plan possible. But that's not always the right way to look at things. You want to plan for 10 years out, 20 years out, and just kind of think about your family history and how your situation could change in the future. So these are the most common questions that I get from my clients who are a little bit older, like in their 70s, their 80s, and their 90s. For example, if I'm no longer able to make decisions for myself and my healthcare, how can I change my plan? So this is where it's really important to have a plan in place before the crisis hits. Have a designated power of attorney or an authorized representative who is legally allowed to act on your behalf. Because if they need to change your plan, they have the ability to do that, and the plan will recognize that person as someone who can do that for you. What sort of things trigger a need to change my plan? I had a client who was perfectly happy on his Kaiser Medicare Advantage plan for many years, but then he lost his license and was no longer able to drive that far and could no longer make it to the Kaiser facilities. So he ended up changing his plan to something that allowed him to go to doctors that were closer so he could take public transportation. Another question, if I need to stay in a rehab facility after a hospital stay, how is that covered? Medicare says I get up to 100 days covered, but my Advantage plan only wants to cover 10 days. Don't they have to cover 100 days? And the answer is no. So the doctors, determine your health condition at the time to determine how long that you're going to be in that facility. It's not just a guaranteed 100 days. If my condition's not improving, what happens next? Does Medicare cover home care services like bathing, grooming, dressing, feeding, and transfers? The answer is no. Medicare does not cover services for the activities of daily living. That would be something that you'd need long-term care coverage or a home care plan, which is also available if you don't have long-term care insurance. So talk to me about that later. My social worker at the skilled nursing facility says I should cancel my Medicare Advantage plan and go back to Original Medicare so my facility can be covered. Is that a good idea? No. That is not a good idea, because then you're back on Original Medicare with unlimited financial exposure, and you would not be able to purchase a supplement to take care of that 20% coinsurance that you would owe that skilled nursing facility. So that could be catastrophic financially. So if all of this information has got you feeling overwhelmed, just reach out for a free consultation. It doesn't cost anything to get some advice. And don't forget that you can start scheduling questions for annual enrollment if you don't have a valid election period. We can still get you on the calendar for October, November, December to get your questions answered. And next up is Alisha.
Wow, what a great slide that last one was. I hear a lot of those misconceptions, and in my role as well, regularly about Medicare and Medicaid and what's covered and what isn't. Hi everyone, Alisha with Oasis Senior Advisors. I like to call this section thought bombs, some thought-provoking questions. I enjoy starting off talking about guide service. what are some benefits of working with a guide? And, what are some detriments to not working with a guide? I think one thing that all of our speakers here today have in common is that we offer free advice, and we can certainly be your guide as you're navigating everything related to your particular family or situation. So what can a guide service help with? Well, I mean, they're knowledgeable in their field, right? They're somebody who can share their experience. They've worked with many different people and dynamics. They are able to help you look at areas that you might not have thought to look. What happens when you don't have a guide? Well, gosh, things can get overwhelming really quick, can't they? There's so many details to sift through. You're not sure what questions to ask or where to start looking. You can get frustrated by all the unknowns. You could be missing out on resources. The more difficult the path, the more valuable and beneficial it is to have a guide. When I meet with clients, I'll sit down with them and get to know their particular situation, because every situation is different. I'll ask them questions to better understand what kinds of concerns or drivers are important to them and their particular situation. One of the things that Holly spoke about today is getting that advanced directive in place and the POLST. One other thing I'd like to add to that is the power of attorney, which Jackie touched on as well. I think many folks can get confused. Well, I have the healthcare proxy. Doesn't that allow me to make decisions to move my loved one to a facility? Well, not necessarily. The healthcare proxy only covers so much. Like it gives you access to speak to your medical professionals, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you get to make decisions on your loved one's behalf when it comes to things like housing. I am not a financial person. I'm also not a elder attorney, but almost 20 years in the business, I can tell you that it's really important not just to have the advanced directive in POLST, but also the power of attorney in place. And I think Joy can probably tell you that having a spouse as your power of attorney might not be the best option. You want somebody who is maybe younger and a little bit more able-bodied, someone whose health is less likely to be compromised, so that they can continue on making decisions as you continue to need their support later in life. I'm going to tell a quick story about a client of mine. This happens quite often, where the hospital will call and say, we have a patient here who's needing memory care. I'll go into the hospital to meet with the patient. I'll find out that they have moderate dementia, and there's no power of attorney in place. And the daughter will say, well, can I get the power of attorney in place now? That's tricky. If the person is questionable whether or not they have capacity, you may not be able to get a power of attorney in place. They have to be able to call the attorney's office, have the wherewithal to request the appointment, and to be able to speak to why they want to give that power of attorney. It's not always easy to do with somebody who has moderate dementia. And if it is listed in their medical chart that they don't have capacity, that attorney really shouldn't be signing up to say, okay, they can have power of attorney. So all of these are great examples as to, why not wait? Why get the stuff in place beforehand? Depending on the situation, your care team could take up to 6 or 7 people. So again, as I meet with those clients, the things I'm trying to understand is, what does that team look like? I'm going to help answer questions that the clients have and plug them into the right types of resources. Some of the questions that come up most commonly for me are, what are the different types of senior housing? What's offered at the different levels of care? How do I know when my loved one needs to move from one level to the next level? What kinds of programs are available that I might not be aware of? What's the difference between Medicare and Medicaid? What is a Medicaid spend down? I've heard that term a lot. And then just how long does this process take? You know, families want to understand, especially if their loved one's in the hospital and the hospital is saying, hey, we need to get them out right away. How quickly is it realistic for them to move forward in the process? And so I'll walk through all of these things together with my clients to help them better understand expectations around what the process is like, who might need to be involved, and what are the different offerings available based on what their loved one's needs are. 60% of the clients that I help, unfortunately, are actually reaching out after they've had a crisis. Their loved one had a fall, they were in the hospital, they're in rehab, they have to figure something out. I think Joy's slide that spoke to people not wanting to have this conversation early on, that happens with me too. I don't know if it's out of fear or what, but usually folks are not talking about this. They may be met with frustration from their loved one, and then they just shut down and don't want to talk about it again. So if I could do anything, it would be to encourage you not to wait for a crisis before you start having these conversations with a loved one. And if it feels overwhelming or it feels like it's not going anywhere, that's a great time to loop somebody in who is a guide, like one of our speakers here today, that can help further that discussion. My name's Alisha. I'm with Oasis Senior Advisors. I can be an advocate. I can be your support person, your cheerleader, your local guide, someone who knows the industry, who knows the area, and who wants to help empower you to feel informed about the decisions related to your loved one's care. If none of this resonates with you personally, then perhaps you might encounter a friend or a coworker who's going through this process with their loved ones. It's a great time to introduce a resource such as a senior living advisor. It's a free service to families, and it can help eliminate some of that overwhelming stress that goes along with this journey. Let's not wait for a crisis to keep the conversation going.
Thank you, Alisha. That's really valuable information. Our most important goal and point to get across today is just make sure you have a support team before the crisis hits. So have a financial planner, a tax advisor, a health insurance advisor, legal counsel for your estate and elder care, a long-term care plan, a senior living advisor, and a mortgage broker who understands your goals for retirement, a senior real estate specialist who's invested in helping you find your forever home. Ideally, they will all communicate well together to make sure that you're holistically covered. And we just want to thank you for the opportunity to share this information with you. We will be sending out a resource packet to the email that you use to register for the webinar. And if you'd like to set up any free follow-up appointments with us, just reach out. And now we're going to stop the recording and open up the microphones for the Q&A portion of the webinar.